Today is Doctor Who Sunday, and today is the day where we don't address any woke issues that are going on in the world, and we have a little bit of fun and we review some Doctor Who. In this case, we have some classic Doctor Who, and I know this is one that you have all been waiting for weeks now, but it's taken me a little while to put together. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, switch on the notification bells so you know I'm releasing another video. Thank you to everyone who's joined me already. I cannot run this channel without you. We are on the way to 2,000 subscribers officially now. We made 1,500 subscribers the other day. Thank you so much. But can we get to the 2K now? Can we do it? You are all very lucky that you're getting this review today because I promptly soaked my notebook in water by accident and had to dry out the pages with a hairdryer and then put it to air dry. Now, luckily, none of the pages that I wrote on for this particular review were smudged that badly. And ironically, all of the other reviews that I have worked on in between working on this one were all smudged. So I think that's a good sign. Today, we are talking about the trial of a Time Lord, which was voted by you, the subscriber. To vote on the current poll, please head on over to the post page where you can find it. I release a new poll every Saturday at 10 a.m. I also try to feature subscriber comments in each review that I do, so be sure to keep out an eye for those posts. And I will ask you for your opinion on each story. So I've had a lot of comments for this particular part of the trial of a Time Lord, and it was very difficult to choose which ones to feature. So the trial of a Time Lord is a very long story, and in order to make it coherent, I'm going to break it down into its individual stories. Even though it is seen as one, I will acknowledge that before I continue. So we're going to look at the first four parts, which is The Mysterious Planet, in this part of the review. It was written by Robert Holmes, it was directed by Nicholas Mallet, and it aired from the 6th of September 1986 and finished on September 27th, 1986. The average viewing figure was 4.35 million people, which ironically, even though it is one of the better stories, it's the lowest scoring story in the trial of a Time Lord. Interesting that. I find that very interesting. And it's Robert Holmes. So that's even more interesting that that should happen. The Doctor is being put on trial for his meddling and interfering nature. He is summoned to a space station where he meets the Valeyard and the Inquisitor. The Doctor's memory is fuzzy, but the Valeyard presents evidence from the Matrix that has been recorded as to the Doctor's notorious and meddling nature and the reason why people die around him. The Valeyard suggests that the trial should be a full trial, with the penalty being the termination of the Doctor's life. The Valeyard shows evidence from the planet Ravolox that distinctly reminds Peri of Earth. We see them wandering around the planet. We also see Sabalon Glips and Dibber. These two are planning to destroy the light conversion system. This conversion system has been turned into a totem pole by a tribe. This tribe is ruled by Katrika, who has seen so many people come to try and take down this totem. So therefore she will not allow Glitz and Dibber to do the same, and she throws them in prison. Later, Peri is also thrown into prison with them. This is because the Doctor had gone off on his own investigating and had been taken to meet the robot Drathro. He discovers that he needs to disable the black light system because it's imperative for life and saving the world. The Doctor promises to help repair the system, but he determines that it is beyond repair and says that it has to be shut down. Drathro, of course, does not want this to happen because that would mean his own destruction. The Doctor continuously pleads and begs him to reconsider, but this would prevent the explosion of the entire universe. However, he does not. The Doctor notices that the black light system has, in fact, started its own self-destruction already, so he has to try and stop the chain reaction. He manages to make it so that it only destroys the castle. However, Drathro takes a big hit. What does this mean for the Doctor? Does he save the universe? And he does, naturally, of course. And the remaining inhabitants of Ravolox were able to start a new life on the surface. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think of this story. Naturally, this is a huge story, so I'm going to need some help, and I'm bound to miss something out because, well, it's me. I always do. There are lots of issues with the trial of a Time Lord. I will start saying that firstly. And whilst this is an epic saga, so to speak, it wasn't the wisest of moves because we know that the TV series at the time was facing the chopping block. They had to really impress the controllers here in order to keep it going because the series was on trial. They decided to put the Doctor on an actual trial. And I think this is one of those stories that would have been better off being scrapped and them just doing 4 to 5 individual stories that they had been doing with Colin's first season, which actually was pretty well received despite what people think of Colin's Doctor. But because he had a hiatus in the middle of it, I think his viewing figures really did suffer, and I think also the writing did suffer because it was quite convoluted, this story, in many respects. So it did really suffer, especially because you go backwards and forwards between the courtroom and the main part of the story. John Green 7619 says, I wish I liked it better. Both leads are doing their best and show a great relationship, but the apathy on the production side is all too clear. And I often spent a fair amount of this rewatch wondering how much exactly was playing through onto the screen, or if that was because I knew what was going on behind the scenes. So maybe I felt like I was more hyper aware of it than perhaps what I would have been when I first watched it and I wasn't aware that it had happened. I try my best to always separate these things from the production itself, but it's not always easy to do that. The Mysterious Planet isn't the worst of the bunch, I don't think, in my honest opinion, but it has a lot of issues, and I will cover that a bit later. But let's talk about the good stuff, because it does have its good stuff, you know. I am a big Colin Baker fan, so I cannot go without praising the Sixth Doctor. I think he does a fantastic job. He's got a lot of weight on his shoulders throughout this entire story arc. I know he quite often says, Colin this is, that he doesn't really know what was going on behind the scenes, and that may very well be the case. But there were people who said that he was trying to placate a lot of things that were going on. So imagine doing that, but then also working on your Doctor to the point where you pulled it back. And he clearly went away thinking, what can I do to make my Doctor work? He tried to soften his Doctor. I know that's something that he did always want to do anyway, and he's very much gone and done that now within the Big Finish stories. But he was trying to do it in this story as well. I think he might have needed a lot more direction, but it's very clear that he worked very hard with the director. I think he's trying to give his Doctor more varying colours. He's definitely not so snappy anymore. I think the relationship between his Doctor and Peri has developed They made it look like they were traveling together for a very long time by this point. And I think that was a good move to do, actually, because obviously we had the hiatus. So there's going to be some passage of time. And, well, Nicola's hair was longer as well. So you had to make it work. I don't know why I said that, but I did. He has his doctor moment in this story. Annoyingly enough, it is in the courtroom. He has a full debate with the Valeyard, but he has a mega outburst, and it is utmost outrage. He had already presented this type of outrage in his first series as the Doctor, so it wasn't anything new, but because he had played the rest of the story throughout varying degrees of colour when this actually hit in part 4, it was a million times better than what he would have done in the previous series, and I appreciate that he took the time and effort to do this. Not many actors would go away and analyse their work like that. I'm just saying, at least that's what I think. I've seen that happen with other actors. And you could see that he's really thinking about it. I think it's one of his best Doctor Who moments in the TV series. This Doctor is given a lot of action. You can really sense his fractiousness when his franticness, when he tries to prevent a black light explosion. Even a child who may not know exactly what is going on would be very enthralled by what the Doctor is talking about and how he is acting. He's certainly very much a hero in this story. He frees the underground slaves. He's certainly focusing on the urgency when he is talking to Drathro about switching off the black light because of the black light explosion. It's almost fearful. It's very tense, and I'm very dramatic. So I appreciate that. He had some very eloquent discussion with Drathro in this story. I liked the sequence when the Doctor is captured by the robot and tied up. It is pretty well staged as well, actually. You can tell that they had some very good rehearsals for this story. The actors themselves would have loved playing out the court scenes, even though they're very weak. Not the actors, the court scenes, I mean. I also think it was perfectly well within the Doctor's character to go ahead and refuse a court defender. He had the smarts and the intelligence to defend himself, and I like that. I also like the fact that he is no longer the Lord President of Gallifrey. I always imagine that would be something the Doctor would never want to be tied down with. So when it happened, I was like, what? Why? They tried to work in some fun little quirks to his Doctor. I noticed as well, he's randomly carrying a teddy bear. Why is he carrying a teddy bear? And what does he need a teddy bear for? Who knows? But he has one. However, this now does bring me to some downers. One of the biggest things that I do not like about this story is the fact that it keeps cutting back to the trial room, which sounds completely dumb because the series is called The Trial of a Time Lord, but I find that it takes away from the actual context of the story that is going on before the viewer's eyes. I know that he is being tried for interfering with other galactic affairs, but it just really isn't necessary. Just because of what is going on outside, they had to make it representative and put it into the story. Most of the message may have gone over people's heads. However, I think once you know the full story of what's going on, well, it's pretty obvious what the message actually is. This does lead to some of the worst interactions between the Doctor and the Valeyard. It was almost childish. I know they definitely had fun doing that. I'm not going to contest that. They've all said that they had fun doing that, and that is fine. But the writing for it, I don't know what Eric Sherwood was thinking when he wrote these segments to link these stories together to the trial, because it resulted in things like the Doctor calling the Valeyard such things as boatyard, graveyard, knacker's yard, that type of thing. It's not something that I personally would ever associate with the Doctor. I know we get the buffoonery with him from time to time, but people often say that when you resort to calling people names, that's when you've lost the argument. Take that as what you will and what that would mean for the show. I just did not like it. I really didn't like all of the cuts back to the trial room. I know I've said it already, but let me be more specific here because I wasn't specific earlier. It's not a good idea to put the Doctor on trial. It's a good idea for Troughton, but not for this Doctor. This Doctor needed something different. But the issue that I have with the cuts is that it plagues its way through the entire story arc, and it also affects the main story because they stop it at the best parts in some cases. And one of the best bits in this entire part of the story is the Doctor getting hit by stones. I had to phrase that very carefully as well, or I would have been demonetized for no reason at all. Now, it's good that the Immortal stops the Doctor from dying. I like that. I was really enjoying what was happening to the Doctor. I know that sounds a bit morbid and a bit dark, but it cut back to the courtroom. It should have finished on a cliffhanger with the Doctor getting hit by stones, but instead it finishes with the Valeyard saying that it should have the maximum life sentence for the Doctor, which was the termination of the Doctor's life. And then we get a close-up zooming in on Colin's face for the cliffhanger, which happens quite a fair bit throughout the entire story arc. And it's, well, I feel really sorry for Colin, actually. Now, not all the cliffhangers were bad. For example, the cliffhanger in part 2, the Doctor's trapped by the robot and Katrika's army, and the Doctor says, I really think this could be the end. I thought that was a good cliffhanger. It didn't finish in the courtroom either. We also get a very rare moment where the cliffhanger ends on a guest actor. The cliffhanger in part 3 ends on Murdine, and the question is, does he take the Doctor's life? But then our fourth cliffhanger is pretty weak because there's more evidence to come. Determine the Doctor's life. I think a lot of this writing is quite shoddy. You see, I love the Colin Baker Doctor. He's my favourite Doctor, but I can also be extremely critical of his era. I have no choice but to be. I've got to judge it fairly. If I can judge Tom Baker fairly, I need to do the same here. To see the amount of subscribers just walking out the door because I just dissed the Tom Baker Doctor. I'm joking, it's absolutely fine. He's fine as the Doctor, he's just not my favourite. Just another thing to add about the cutaways is that they're probably the equivalent of my dislike for the sonic screwdriver, although the sonic screwdriver is inherently worse. Because other than zooming in and cutting away at the wrong time, they don't really add much to the story until the last parts of it, if that makes sense. Another thing that I have issues with is the Matrix being used in this story. Now, it's only referred to in this story. It's not until the end of the trial of the Time Lord, the last 2 parts, where we entered the Matrix. But the issue that I have with it is because it was introduced in The Deadly Assassin, that means that they can bring it back as a plot device whenever they want because it's an easy tool to use. And I don't always appreciate that type of writing because you have all that weird stuff that happens in The Deadly Assassin and it works with The Deadly Assassin. But the thing is, until the last story, it doesn't really work having it there because what the Valeyard can do is say, well, this happened because it's in the Matrix. But then the Doctor could be like, I don't remember this happening. This is being manipulated. And then the Inquisitor's like, you can't manipulate the Matrix. I just don't find it very creative, particularly in a courtroom setting. Now, let's get back to the positives because I can't ignore this any longer. The opening shot in part 1 is one of the best opening shots in Doctor Who history. You can't deny it. You just can't deny it. Well, you can deny it if you like. I don't mind if you disagree with me. That's absolutely fine. But I personally think it is in this respect. They clearly have sat down and they have thought, right, what can we do to visually help save Doctor Who? Like, a third of the budget would have been spent perhaps on the courtroom, and part of the mysterious planet was filmed on location, so they could probably afford a little bit extra to go that extra mile and do one of the best openings that we have ever seen in classic. It's a shot that they use and in different ways throughout the entire story. It was amazing just getting it beamed in like that. It was so good. It's so clear. For the first time in Doctor Who history, it was so good. That was a fantastic piece of engineering. And I'm not going to say that all the other special effects are terrible, okay, because they were all unique for their time, but this was really upping the game. They were upping the ante. I'm no special effects expert, so I've no idea how it would have been done back then, but it was fabulous. Floydian 2007 says, after the glorious opening sequence of the space station dragging the TARDIS into the beam, it's downhill from there. Very dull story, lots of getting captured, escaping, and then getting caught again. No real threat or particularly scary, just pointless runaround. Good incidental music and relationship between the Doctor and Perry is much better. I don't find this story dull, but I do agree that there's lots of getting captured and escaping and getting caught again, as said in this comment. And I do agree that the relationship between the Doctor and Perry is much improved, and I praise those two performers for working really hard on it. This story is also subject to some other very good special effects, although not as high in quality. I really like the Doctor using the electrocution and how they did all of that around Drathro in order to help his minions escape and things like that. And I like how they blow up the beacon, the transmit beacon, that is. And it was such a great plot device doing that because it made the power unstable, which causes everything else to unfold, and we get that fantastic performance from Colin. There's a lot of little clever plot devices throughout this entire story. How they managed to create the demise of Broken Tooth and Katrika, the type of electrocution and a bunch of lightning and the blood that was pouring down their face, that was extreme. I love that. It's certainly something that I did not expect, for sure. I mean, that's quite horrific, seeing them being struck by lightning, cutting away, and then coming back to their faces just streaming in gory blood. And I just want to say some things about Joan Sims here. Her character reminds me of Joan of Arc, or Boudica, or Boadicea, however you say it. There's different pronunciations for it. It's very much the type of character that is a strong, independent leader, a warrior. And this makes sense because she's done this for thousands of years. Sorry, she is thousands of years in the future. You must get that right, Rachel. And it's very clear that Joan very much enjoyed the role. You can tell that she did. It's not something that you would ever associate with Joan Sims taking the role like this. Now, obviously, we know in the UK who she is. She was always in the Carry On films. However, I'm not sure if people in the USA know who she is. I don't know if you get the Carry On films over there, but that's what she was really well known for over here. So to see her pop up in Doctor Who was probably quite a treat for everyone because she's quite a funny actress. Well, she was quite a funny actress. So seeing her do a very serious role was brilliant. I also find it interesting that even though it's set thousands of years in the future, so to speak, we find out that it is Earth, but in the wrong position. They did a historical setting for those characters. That's very intriguing. I wondered why they did that. They often seemed at one with a natural UK habitat. I often find myself asking myself, where on earth did they film things like this for Doctor Who? We're quite rich with countryside habitat over here in the UK. Now, what does everyone else think of Drathro? The reason why I ask is because I quite like his design and I love the voiceover performance of the character, but he doesn't really do much. Other than that, I see him as a bit of an anti-villain, if you understand what I mean, because I like the idea that he needs to use the black light in order to survive. But I also like the idea that he doesn't want to turn it off because obviously he wants to live. In order to survive, he obviously turns on the vent, which I thought was great because it was a little scary moment, and we get to see the Doctor acting as a hero as he tries to save all of his friends. And I also think that he's not played with a lot of anger, though, in my opinion, compared to a lot of other villains that we get in Doctor Who, I think he's almost understated. I'm not sure if that type of character is suited to Doctor Who or not. I don't know. We get it with other characters, and that suits it. But robot, understated robot, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. What do you think? Now, I'm going to focus on Peri in the second story of the Trial of the Time Lord because right now I want to focus on Glitz and Dibber. These two are quite fun characters. My question is, would they have made good companions? I personally don't have an answer for that myself. I'm just interested in what you may think. They're your typical street urchin thieves, almost black market types of characters, aren't they? Little do we know that they have a bigger role altogether, especially Glitz. We don't know at this point what it is that was in the black box that Glitz and Dibber wanted. That's only left for viewers to try and work out for themselves until the end of the entire arc. But I love how they made it so the Doctor could save everyone. They gave the Doctor a chance to shut down the computer by doing something that I didn't expect. That was a double cross because of the nature of the characters. Well, it appears to be a double cross because Drathro needs the black light to survive, and they both convinced him that they have the black light, and they double cross him, and then naturally, of course, they make a break for it. Very clever little plot twist there, and I think those characters were extremely well used throughout, and it's very clear these actors enjoyed doing this. It's almost like the better version of Adric, even though I don't mind the character of Adric. Mark NH2HS says, I always had a soft spot for this story. Remember it being aired on TV as a kid, and the Sixth Doctor I loved and still is one of my fave Doctors. I love his sarcasm and condescending responses, especially about the sacred texts. The courtroom parts I never found jarring like others do. Plus you have Sabalon, Glitz and Dibber, two of the best characters. When Glitz returned in Dragonfire, I was so happy to see him again, but often wondered what happened to Dibber. I agree. I was glad when Glitz came back, and I often wondered what happened to Dibber as well. Overall, The Mysterious Planet is an okay story. It's definitely the best of the four, but it's let down by many things, and it is mostly to do with the courtroom. In my opinion, I think putting the Doctor on trial runs the risk of a huge convoluted mess. That was a risk that they clearly were willing to take, because at the end of the day, what else could they lose? The BBC wanted it gone. It had an 18-month hiatus. It was in really bad shape. I don't know if this is true, but when I was doing some research for this story, I read that Eric Saward, his wife, had suggested the trial for the story because the Doctor was on trial in real life. I don't think it's a well executed concept. However, if that is true and he decided to do that, then he took a huge risk taking advice from someone who is, as far as I am aware, not a creative. They could have presented it, as I've said already, in several different stories and then maybe had finished with a trial and made the stories all interlinked in some way to make it towards the end with the trial like they did with the War Games. That could have worked. A rehash, but in a very different way. They also decided for some reason that the experiment of 45-minute episodes was a failure. Now, I disagree. I think that the 45-minute parts in a several part story is a very good thing. It gives it more time. Sometimes 25 minutes can feel a bit rushed, although it is obviously spaced out over several different parts. So for the Trial of the Time Lord, they went with 25-minute episodes for the entire story, except for the last one, which was part 14, and they went with 35 minutes, and they kept it at 14 parts, and we would see this for the remainder of the Sylvester McCoy era. Now, well, let me know what you think. Chat about it, don't shout about it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. with the woke news. Bye bye.